Hey, this is like another installment. We're talking about evidence and creation science. Now, one thing I want people to be aware of philosophically as we're kind of going through this, evidence changes because you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And so some things, we explain, but then we're going to find something new later on down the road, and then we'll have to explain that, and we're going to have to match it with all the evidence. So you're never going to have an eternal answer out of science, even if it's creation science. Now what we have as a Christian, what I have is I have revelation. Okay, that is eternal word from God. But the atheist does not have this. Now, in order for the atheist to debunk the Christian, because they love to be skeptical of Christianity, they have to have authority. Okay? Well, their only authority is science and philosophy. And they don't tell people that philosophically they've really ruined themselves because they have no answer for absolute truth. It's all relativism. So at that point, when I go about scientific information, my goal is to destroy the system of evolution and show proof why that is not, why that is fallible and it's not working. Okay. Now, creation scientists, being the fact that they are scientists, are going to come up with explanations and theories like any other scientist, and they're going to be accepted, and they might be rejected, and the story will go on with them. Okay, but that's just the fact that they're scientists. But basically, I'm not going to use that as positive proof, just like when I talked about philosophy. I'm not using the philosophical proofs of God to prove God as much as debunk atheism. So this will be evidence debunking evolution, not to prove scientific creationism. Okay. The evidence that I have is the general experience of the gospel and the power of the Bible and religion and things like that. In that nature, the eternity of God's Word is my evidence. The other side doesn't have any evidence. They just want to debunk mine. Now, going back with it, part of evolution is the origin of plants. Okay, what is the evolutionary evidence that plants have evolved from different plants? And you got to think about this because, if the Earth is billions of years old and you had millions of years, and plants are first because they're more primordial, how did you have all these plants cover the Earth, absorbing oxygen? Well, actually, no. They're giving out oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide with no animals who'd be giving out carbon dioxide and absorbing the oxygen. Okay? Think about that. Here's what it says. The origin of flowering plants, angiosperms, which Darwin termed an abominable mystery, that's what Darwin called it, is still today for evolutionists an abominable mystery. Discovering the problem, Hughes has this to say. The scientist named Hughes. The evolutionary origin of the now dominant land plant group, the angiosperms, has puzzled scientists since the middle of the 19th century. After describing several attempts why the evidence for evolutionary origin cannot be found, Hughes says, with few exceptions of detail, however, the failure to find a satisfactory explanation has persisted, and many biologists have concluded that the problem is not capable of solution by fossil evidence. Beck has stated that instead, the mystery of the origin and early evolution of the angiosperms is as persuasive and as fascinating today as it was when Darwin emphasized the problem in 1879. Flowering plants burst upon the scene in bewildering variety. 43 families of angiosperms abruptly appeared with no trace of ancestors or intermediate forms. No wonder evolutionists describe their origin as an abominable mystery. And that was Dr. Dwayne Gish. Think about that. Flowering plants need what? They need bees. If there are no bees, then how are the flowering plants surviving for millions of years? Now, in general, I've gotten a lot of evidence, and you've probably seen this before with intelligent design people, so I don't want to get into it too deeply. But in general, they've not found any of these intermediate species. Now, every species in Darwinian evolution has to have an intermediate species, but have we found any? Now, a good book to look at is Darwin on Trial. Let's see. I've got a lot of information. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have time to get it all recorded for the purposes of this video. But basically, you have all these different groups. Here's one that's simple. Reptiles of birds. Okay, remember there was a period where they thought birds, like that all dinosaurs related to birds? It says, even the often cited Archaeopteryx shows no sign of the crucial scale, feather, or limb-wing transition. It's Carweiland, Major Categories of Scientific Evidence for Special Creation. You know, if you have, let's say like you take a bat, alright? Well, the bat, if it evolved, came from what? You know, we'll just say a rat, okay? I know I'm not using really strict science here, but, you know, let's say there was like a rat-like creature, okay, and it turned into the bat. Well, the intermediate would have to be something with like a big membrane just kind of flopping around, right? Well, would that be a superior species that would survive? Well, no, because it's got that big membrane, and, you know, you could get some sort of snake or whatever to catch onto the membrane and it would kill it. So how could it survive for millions of years in order to develop the membranes good enough to be wings to where it could fly? Okay? The human eye, if you kind of devolve the human eye, the first time backwards, you know, they try to do it within 40 steps. The first step, it becomes blind. Why would you be blind for a couple million years in order to develop sight? That doesn't make something survive. So, you know, we go back with that, and then one thing I also wanted to talk about was there are some things that, you know, the Earth just does not seem to be 3 billion or 4.6 billion years old. You see, there's that shadiness again, that kind of fiction there. One issue is comets. Okay, comets are snowballs, therefore they're primordial. Okay, they're snowballs filled with carbon and ice, and they're floating around the universe. Nobody's figured out where they come from. They said, well, maybe there's some giant ice cloud. Well, they haven't found the ice cloud. So you have these primordial snowballs. Well, if they're primordial and they're like 10 billion years old, then how long are those snowballs going to last? Well, snowballs melt. So comets should be melted away by now, because everything else has evolved, right? So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense there. The Earth's electromagnetic field is decreasing. This is a big one. The total energy stored in the Earth's electromagnetic field has steadily decreased by a factor of 2.7 over the past 1,000 years. Evolutionary theories explaining this rapid decrease, as well as how the Earth could have maintained its magnetic field for billions of years, are very complex and inadequate. Okay, so the Earth's magnetic field, if it's decreasing, then you go back in time and it's getting stronger, okay, as you go back in time. Well, if you go back 10,000 years, the Earth would be one big fireball, which does not mix with evolution, okay? What scientists have decided to do is they said, well, every 20,000 years, and I guess we could do some different factors, maybe they use fuzzy math there, but every 20,000 years, these magnetic poles will kind of switch. And if you look at the movie 2012, that's what that was. That was like, oh, well, the magnetic field switched over. If that happens, what's going to happen to the power of the magnetic field? Well, it's going to get weaker, okay? It's going to get more weaker. Well, if it gets more weaker, then the electromagnetic field was stronger, okay? So if it was stronger, then the Earth is just not that old. Alright, so that contradicts the whole theory. And with these naturalistic things, what you have to understand is that we're guessing if the world always stayed the same and if the world never changed, and we take science from there. But the Earth may have changed. And we can explain this through creation. We can explain this through a God having providence over this. But if we have a chaotic universe, we can't explain how life got here at all. Now, the last piece is when we look at geology. What geology did in the late 1700s under a guy named Charles Lyell is they developed a system where if you look, there's different types of crust and different types of dirt in the earth, and they call those strata. And what he did was he said, okay, well, we got these different types, and each type is different according to its age. Well, how do we know the ages of these types of strata? Because one thing that they don't mention is that it's all chaotic. In other words, they'll find sandstone up high, and then they'll find it down low in different places in the earth. It's all mixed up. I think they've only found 2 places that have Lyell's specific list. One was a site out in Omaha. I think the other one was in China. Lyell's list was supposed to be about 100 miles deep. But these 2 examples, out of all the geology that they ever studied, is only a mile deep. Okay, so how did he guess that this one's older and that one's not if everything's all mixed up and chaotic? Well, he guessed it according to evolutionary theory. Whichever strata seemed to have more of one animal would be this old, and then another animal is that old, and then the more complex animals must be newer, and the less complex animals must be older. And then when Darwin started working on evolution, he said we can find in these rock layers different animals in the rock layers. And so with different animals in these rock layers, we can guess that these animals are older based on the strata. So evolution is based off of uniformitarian geology. That's the name of Lyell's system. Uniformitarianism is based on evolution. Evolution is based off of uniformitarianism. What is that? It's circular reasoning. Okay? They always accuse us of circular reasoning, but they have circular reasoning to prove evolution. It doesn't work. And of course, there are animals that get in different strata anyway. How do you explain all the chaos? Well, a global flood would explain it. And every ancient society has a story of a global flood. Of course, the Bible has one, and the Bible's story is a lot more scientific than the rest of it. So, in conclusion of that, what we find is that, the experience in history and philosophy backs up the Bible, and science can be properly interpreted to back up the Bible, and it cannot work for the alternative of evolution.